Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
To the Emerald Planet, as we come to you on a week-to-week basis, looking at 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, technologies, services, products, and of course the people are making a difference as we go through the 21st century. And as we go to a planet of 9 billion people by 2050, how are we going to be able to provide everything that they need? The food, the fuel, the fiber, the basic infrastructure, education, healthcare, all of these things that are essential for human life on this planet. And at the same time is how do we actually protect the planet from humankind and all the changes that we're bringing here. I have a gentleman sitting right beside me who is a world expert. I can say that about him. This is Bertus J. Mines. He is the President and Executive Director of the Mines Consulting Associates. Has a stellar career in many different areas. And Bertus, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Thank you, Sam. It's a great pleasure to be here with you.
I'm always glad to have you. I've only been trying to get you here for about 3 years, I think, something like that.
That's right.
I had to lean on your son to try to get you out with us. But tell us a little bit about the mission and the vision as far as the Mines Consulting Associates.
Okay. Let me call it MCA, just to be a little bit on the shorter side. We are basically a network of about 25 or 30 international experts in development who have been working most often long times for the multilateral institutions, some of development banks, some of national development banks, some of other international organizations like the World Health Organization or PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization. People with a lot of experience who are motivated to continue after their retirement, sometimes early, sometimes a little later, but after retirement to continue working in the field of promoting development and promoting inside the development context sustainability of whatever we have been doing during our professional life.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. So what you do is you have this broad network of companies and individuals really that have expertise and cover many different disciplines, many different skill sets. But how can a firm like yours really aid and abet development on a global basis?
No, that is a very important question for us because basically the way we operate is the following. We are still living in Washington. Washington is really the center of the world in terms of international organizations who work on development. It's a very important area, and a lot of people not only work inside the multilateral institutions, but also work for think tanks, for social clubs, for other groups that work on the development field. A lot of them have all kinds of publications, articles, and what have you. Stay very active in this way and maintain contacts as a network among themselves. This is very important.
Right. So looking at this, really, even though you have your own consultancy, it really is the network.
It is the network.
That's the core and that's the root of
and I think
everything that you're doing.
It's not only very important, it's also unique that you really have a group of people who stay in contact, keep each other informed of what they're doing or what their main interest is, but we also keep contact with our home offices, which is basically the multilateral institutions where a lot of development thinking takes place, also in the think tanks. So in that way, it's really a functioning network that is being fed new information, new insights, new approaches on a continuous basis.
But Bertus, that really goes to the heart of what we're talking about, is that you're really working with peers, people that you've been around for a long time. You know them, you know how they act, how they react, what their skill sets are, but you like each other.
Also.
I think that's key. And that comes across just the time that the times I've spent with you is that you're very friendly, gregarious, outgoing, and I'm sure the other people reflect that same attitude. But looking at milestones, how do you determine when you have this association, and I won't say necessarily a loose association network, but how do you establish milestones so that you know whether you're actually achieving the goals and objectives and a mission that you've set for yourself and for the whole group?
Yeah, well, first of all, the success can be measured in what we achieve, but also it can be measured in terms of development we promote. And it's really our mission to promote the development in whatever fashion we can use. First of all, the MDRs, they do nothing but promoting development, but they go about it in one way, and that's a very important way. That is, first of all, you identify...
The MDRs are?
The World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the International Development Association, African Bank, Asian Banks. They have an almost daily conversation with the countries that they work for. And it's a dialogue, it's a policy dialogue, and also a dialogue about sequencing of intervention, sequencing of projects. Now, on the other hand, are people in the private sector who often have an idea, or they have a machine, or they have equipment in the field that they can use to construct something. It's a different approach because they already have the supply side, and they want to talk to the demand side. And the multilateral approach is starting on the demand side and then basically translating it to the needs that need to be met. Now, this is where we basically converge a little bit, and where we can be helpful.
So in essence, you're the bridge in between these two, the demand and the supply.
Yeah, and also we try to be innovative in the sense that we try to speed up the process. Because people in the private sector normally are relatively fast. People in the countries, in the developing countries themselves, need things relatively fast. The process of the multilateral institutions is speeding up, but it's still a process where the preparation of a project may take 3 years, sometimes even somewhat long. That's a long time, and also means on the side of the country themselves, 3 years may mean a new government already.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
not even
the
of the same persuasion or whatever. So if you can speed up the process, that would be very helpful. Now, the way we go about this, because we know people in institutions, we know who might be helpful in moving certain project ideas. We can address people to the right person who is willing and capable and sits at a place in an organization where they can speed up the processing. So we don't need to start at the bottom, but we can move it.
Well, you're starting at the appropriate level to the project itself. And so this goes back to the knowledge base, the wisdom that you've gained over all these many years that you've been involved in this. And this is really the next question is, what changes have you seen over the number of years that you've been involved in this whole scene of international development? Because there's been profound changes in some ways, other ways that may have been not enough.
Well, first of all, the multilateral organizations have been working on speeding up their own process very much, and that is very helpful. The other side is on the government side of the countries where we work, the developing countries. You have seen an enormous improvement of the overall policy framework, the macroeconomic policy. There's much more macroeconomic stability than there was 20, 30 years ago. So that is very important, but also on the side of governance. Because of all the interventions and all the talk and all the think tanks that we got, there's a kind of idea, a consensus of what it needs to be done to promote good governance. And a lot of that has basically resulted from people working here in Washington, going back to their home countries, becoming people very high up in governments, ministers, sometimes presidents of countries or whatever, who know how these things operate and also know how, in general terms, you can promote development.
Yeah, and the whole thing about it, too, is that you have this level of trust. This goes back to this network that you established, the level of trust, but also the comfort that I can pick up the phone or I send a text message or whatever it may be, and then I know somebody on the other end is actually going to respond and will have a similar spirit, a similar understanding of what needs to be done in that local area, whether it's on the African continent or Latin America, wherever it may be around the globe.
Yeah, and you may have somebody in between who can translate policies, who can translate ideas also to the private sector, because the private sector may not exactly know what is happening in a certain country and what is the priority of the country and what is the priority of the multilateral institution. So sometimes they come with beautiful ideas for something that would have been very opportune a couple of years ago under another administration, or will be very opportune 5 years down the line when that becomes a joint important item to do with a certain organization. So this timing thing is also very important, but also the private sector needs to be aware of what policies a certain institution has agreed with a certain country.
Now, I was going to ask you about, what the major markets that you work in, but you seem like a pure, true internationalist. So it could be anywhere. You mentioned Iceland earlier. You could be in South Africa. You could be in, wherever it may be around the globe. Yeah. But how do you bring about this balance? And you've given us some keys that you just talked about. So where you're actually having the economy, the environment, civil society, how do you balance these three together so that do no harm to any of these, the unintended consequences, which had happened as you're talking about 20, 30, 40 years ago. Hopefully we have less and less of that as there's more and more demand and more people needing to have these services or whatever development is going on for and around them.
Right. Well, I think the important thing is to realize, first of all, that there is no shortage of money in the world.
I believe that.
There's a lot of money sloshing around the world looking for projects that has a minimum yield and whatever. Right. That is not the real. The real core of the whole thing is implementing projects that is aiding local people. For which we need sustainability in terms of financial and economic.
So you're really inverting the pyramid so
the private sector understand, but also social, environmental, and good governance. Those are all components of a successful development process in the country. If you don't have those, eventually the project will peter out, and the impact that you have is much less than you were expecting in the beginning. So this is the really important thing. So important in this respect is the dialogue that goes on between the organizations, very important, between the think tanks, between other organizations, private sector organizations, but also public organizations, and among themselves. And here we get to one of the problems. The coordination of this is a very crucial one, and we have not yet found the golden rule.
This is Bertus Mines, president of the Mines Consulting Associates, as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
Osama bin Laden calls getting nuclear weapons a religious duty.
Today, materials that can be used to make nuclear weapons are stored in more than 40 countries.
Sometimes protected by just a chain-link fence.
Yet not enough is being done to lock down these materials
before terrorists steal them.
Why did we learn all this?
My mother,
my son,
my sister-in-law
were all murdered September 11th.
Help protect America.
Together we can.
Please join us.
The stem cell issue is being debated throughout the country. Truth is, most everyone has an opinion, even if they don't know the facts.
Let's stop arguing and start really understanding the potential of stem cell research.
For us and for millions of Americans living with disabilities, get the facts.
Call 1-877-842-3442 for free information from the Stem Cell Research Foundation. That's 1-877-842-3442.
Following the tragic events of September 11th, there have been hundreds of violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for.
One nation under God.
Indivisible.
With liberty
and justice
for all.
In America, there's either room for everyone, or it's not America.
Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
Planning a home renovation? Put this at the top of your to-do list. Because after 10 years, none of you are protected against tetanus and another potentially fatal disease, diphtheria. A minor injury, such as a cut or a scrape, can put you at risk for a tetanus infection. And while safety gear offers some protection, an up-to-date vaccination called the TD booster is the best insurance against tetanus. So get the TD booster. If it's been 10, do it again.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you and talk about all the development projects, the activities, the ideas, the wisdom, the knowledge, everything that's needed around the globe as we go to a planet of 9 billion people by 2050. And so we have a ever crowded more planet than before. And at the same time is how do we more efficiently and effectively use the resources needed by all these people so that actually we're increasing and enhancing the quality of life for everyone on the planet, not just the elites, everyone, but at the same time to be able to enhance the resources that we have. I have a gentleman that's actually, I think it's probably his gospel and his underlying philosophy. A fellow I've gotten to know over the last few years, a wonderful human being, but has a real heart for development. And this is Bertus J. Mines, who is the president and executive director of what's called Mines Consulting Associates. And Bertus, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Thank you, Sam. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, I've been trying to get you here for, I think, about 3 years or so, I'm glad that you finally decided you wanted to do this. But give us a quick review of Mines Consulting Associates. But what gives you the ability to adjust and adapt on a very quick basis? Because the world is a very dynamic place. Things are changing, second by second. And yet you're out there somewhat on the tip of the spear working with people. So you have your organization, but yet at the same time trying to make sure you're delivering what's really needed in localities all across the globe.
Right. Well, thank you for that question. It's basically the core of what we're doing. First of all, we are a network of about 25 or 30 very well-known international professionals that most have worked for multilateral organizations like the World Bank or the Inter-American Development Bank or the African or the Asian Development Bank, some other organization, but also for bilateral development organizations. And the important thing is, first of all, life does not stop at 62 or 60 or 65, whenever retirement age. Life goes on in today's world much longer time, and a lot of people like to do something with the knowledge and the expertise they have gained over many years of working in the field of development to do something that we find useful.
Yeah, but then the whole thing about this is that with that years of experience, and if they've been successful, they wouldn't be around if they weren't successful, is there's a level of wisdom that you gain. So when you see things, you hear things, people share things with you, you've already got it figured out because you don't have to go back and try to study and all that. It's just, it's there. So looking at this and going back to expand on this whole thing of adapting and adjusting so that you're really helping people as they need it, when they need it, how do you do that with your organization and this network? How does that actually operate?
Well, first of all, the way we operate is most of us are participating very heavily in important meetings of these international institutions. There are annual meetings, there are special sections, there are seminars and symposia, conferences, and the wonderful thing in Washington is they're almost all here. It's a wonderful place to be. There's an enormous resource of people who have been working for the organization, who have gained insights in how development can be brought about. There are many ways and many approaches, but there are also basic building stones for development.
And there's basic protocols too.
Basic protocols
you want to follow in order to bring something to fruition in a timely manner, correct?
Yeah. Now, we had for the long time the discussion of the Washington Consensus and whatever, and now we are in the post-Washington Consensus time, because the Washington Consensus did a lot of good on the macro side and on the fiscal side, and made a lot of countries more capable to export and whatever, to gain foreign exchange. But on the social side, we missed a few steps. Obviously, that is a grand focus of all people working in development. If you don't have a good acceptance of the general public, the population at large, if you're not working for the man in the street or whatever, in the end, it's not going to be a successful development policy. And that is basically what we have learned. You also need to include the dimension of the human factor in this whole thing. Yeah. And that's very important.
Well, then that's what you're really working for, is that human being out there that's very important. Exactly. And then everything coalesces around that. There was a book some years ago, Brave New World.
Yes.
And this is something that seems to be coming back into vogue and certainly to a conscious mind. So what shifts have you seen as far as the whole concept of the Brave New World, and where may we be going as we move further and further into the 21st century?
I think we live in very interesting times. We may see some major policy focus shifts quite soon in a number of very important countries, including where we are right now. And that will be basically, we have been focusing a lot on fiscal stability and fiscal sustainability, and we have done that especially in Europe with a lot of austerity and tightening the belts. That worked in terms of fiscal stability, but it has not worked in terms of keeping up with the needs that we have. On the one hand, the social needs, but also the infrastructural needs.
Right.
And in the United States, in Europe, but also in other parts of the world, we have basically underinvested in keeping up the infrastructure. And we will probably see much more emphasis on infrastructure all over the world in the coming years. Now, there is a private component to that, and there's a public component. So the financing will have to be worked out.
Right.
But also, if everybody starts working on infrastructure at the same time, there may be capacity bottlenecks, which basically, if you cannot keep up with the capacity soon enough, the price of the intervention will go up. So we have to be very careful on that side, that we give the right signals both to the population and also to the private sector interested in cooperating in this area. What we're going to do, what we're going to prioritize, and what the sequence of activities is going to be. And the time frame, not to forget the time frame.
And looking at this, the key phrases, sustainability, resiliency, capacity, all these kinds of things. What are some of the worries that you and your clients have about this, and that may relate back to, as we move forward to more infrastructure emphasis, do we have the capacity to actually do it? But anyway, back to the question about sustainability, resiliency, and these key phrases as we move through the 21st century.
Well, the sustainability, as I said, will include financial, economic, social, environmental, and also the good governance side. If you get a shift in focus towards infrastructure, especially on the private infrastructure side, we also need to look at the fiscal sustainability, because it will probably be public-private partnerships that will be seen a lot. That has fiscal consequences, they need to be worked out. That has also external debt consequences that need to be worked out. But we also need to look at how will this work in society? How are we going to prioritize? What project are we going to prioritize in this area? And then the very important thing is, how are we, for instance, going to work on things like education, especially in a world where technology takes an ever-increasing role. How are we going to get our young people and also our existing labor force educated well enough that they can deal with the requirements of the modern technology? Those are all elements that will have to be worked out.
Looking at this whole notion of development, there's a nation or several nations that goes out that's now coming under heavy scrutiny and criticism because they're not involving the local people people, not doing skills transfers, education, those kinds of things. How do you think, not calling any names, but how do nations, or how should nations be going about this? So you're building this internal capacity and not constantly trying to export your own, and using a system which, in the bottom analysis, actually becomes abusive instead of being a help to the local citizens. And then, of course, you get pushback, and then you can get instability from the very thing that you're trying to do. You're doing it in a good manner, but yet not taking into account the local population.
Well, I think education will have to play a major role, but also information. And information is not a matter of technology, it's also a matter of basically informing the people what they need to know. Well, some of the modern information has gone in the area of entertainment. Maybe the balance has gone a little bit too far in that area. We need to get basic skills, but also basic insights and basic participation of local people in whatever we do. Think of the adoption of technology. If you go to Africa, if you see how much people are using local, sometimes simple technology, but the cell phone has had a tremendous impact.
Yeah. And that's an absolute understatement. The impact of cell phones on particularly the African continent,
society, basically.
It's just, it has. No. I mean, profound changes.
Now, on top of the cell phone, you can do many other things.
Right.
And, but also, as we move forward to all kind of modern communication system, but things like the financial transfer system that has to be adjusted to the brave new world. You mentioned trust a while ago. Our financial systems are based on trust, but now you add technology or whatever, and going to the local bank may no longer be required or even no longer possible. But how can you maintain
even
the trust
in your own
system?
country? You may be dealing with banking somewhere else.
So the trust is also an element that is fundamental in the development process.
Right. Well, we're almost run out of time. So looking at MDIs, NGOs, foundations, think tanks, all of this, let's go out on this, Bertus. How do these need to be collaborating, working together, and gaining this shared trust, but also a shared knowledge and wisdom so that people have confidence they're really working on our behalf?
Right. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is no shortage of money, but there's shortage of idea, approaches, shortage of people involved in this whole thing. There are also lots of organizations working on development worldwide. But the coordination of this, the prioritization, what are we going to do first? And I think a lot of organizations live in a silo. They work up their own silo, but they don't have too many relationships with other organizations. So somehow we need to create an environment in which all these organizations are working more or less in the same direction, more or less for the same people.
In a true spirit of collaboration, then.
And that is very important.
Key. And thank you, Bertus Mines, who's President, Executive Director of Mines Consulting Associates. And thank you, dear viewer, for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs or to make a tax-free donation, contact C. Fripp at AOL.com.
Here, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America, and reading is fundamental.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you, and as we say, we're looking for the best of the best around the globe. Looking for those technology, services, products, and of course the people are making a difference. And making a difference is certainly profound, and at the same time is meeting the needs of local citizens in very diverse countries, large and small, who have very different needs, but at the same time need to be part of the human family here on planet Earth. And we have a gentleman who is actually working in that area, a good friend that I've gotten to know through Rotary International and through his family. This is Robert W. Mines, who is the Vice President of Mines Consulting Associates, headquartered in Washington, D.C., but a world traveler, to say the least. And Robert, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sam. It's a pleasure to be here.
Glad to have you with us. Say, give us a little overview about your consulting organization, what that means, and then why is your firm important to your clients around the globe?
Sure. Well, MCA is basically a network of about 25 individuals who've worked at international organizations ranging from the World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, UNODC. So really representing a very broad range of knowledge, a broad range of networks, a broad range of expertise. And we try to bring that together for the projects that we work on.
You know, we met, and you were actually living and working in Rome, in Italy, doing work in actually in agriculture.
Agriculture and rural development.
And
yes.
And really goes back to the finance base, the background that you have and all that. And you and I started talking some time ago about this remittances. Now, this in some cases is the lifeblood of many nations and many families within those nations. Other people look at it as a dirty word, as they're taking our money from our country and putting it somewhere else. Very short and simple. But yet remittances is actually important for all societies that are involved in this whole financial chain. Tell us, what is a remittance? Because most people hear the term, they have no idea what it really is. And then what is the supply chain line of that so that it's not only just a one-way flow, but you know, there's a balance to all this?
Sure. Remittances are a very simple thing, Sam. The money that you and I earn, we spend within the family. The only difference between remittances and the way that we handle things is there happens to be a border in between. So somebody working in the United States from El Salvador, for instance, will send that money home. So effectively, that's what a remittance is. It's just money being spent in the family, but being sent back to a home country.
Yeah. Now, looking at that, though, again, going back to this, many view it as, okay, it's our money, you know, from the United States or the UK or France or whatever it is, and it's no longer here.
Sure.
And so it must be doing something bad to us.
Sure.
I mean, that's kind of the mentality. How do you address that issue so that people feel like we have the people here, they're contributing to society, and it's a natural extension that they want to be able to contribute back to their own home area?
Well, it's actually very interesting. There's even a quote from Abraham Lincoln, who himself didn't quite understand how economically it happens. When you send dollars abroad, those dollars eventually come back. So somebody sending money home to their family members will buy products that, because he's holding dollars, need to be in US dollars, so that's American products being exported abroad. In the end, all of that sort of balances out. And what we've seen is that the economic impact of remittances, both in terms of what people do here in this country and in terms of the money that they buy goods with, has a net benefit for whatever country it is that's sending the money away. Everything comes back.
Yeah, and the whole thing about it is, in many cases, they're actually actually building hard assets. They're building houses, they're establishing farms. I know people that have actually, come up with, a whole farm by doing this.
Sure.
And then, of course, basic infrastructure, roads, schools, clinics, those kinds of things. The remittances is a huge amount of money that's actually, it's almost like water. It's flowing all around the globe and it's moving all the time.
It is.
I don't know whether you have an idea of the amount of money that may be going out on a month or annualized basis, but maybe share that with us as far as the scale of that.
Sure.
And then how can it actually be applied in these countries besides, somebody needs a school backpack or, those kinds of things.
Well, that's actually a very big deal. I'm working with an organization who's doing this, the school backpacks at the moment.
That's kind of why I brought it up. So, I teed it up for you.
You're very well informed. No, remittances globally, well, let me start the story where we didn't understand things.
Okay.
About 15 years ago, we thought that the money being sent home by people who work as domestic workers or who work in the service industry or who work as gardeners and plumbers and such couldn't possibly be a significant amount of money. Everybody who knows the stories about people sending $200, $300 home, and that doesn't sound like a lot. But what people fail to realize is there are right now 250 million people sending money home.
Yeah, this is globally.
Globally.
Because we got about, what, 13 million or so just in the United States, if you just look at the ones that are here. Not counting all the families that are supporting their families, and they may have been here 20, 30, 40 years.
Precisely.
Yeah, but so go ahead.
In total, $441 billion is sent home every
single
year.
Say that again.
$441 billion.
That's a lot of money.
That's a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
And in countries like Tajikistan, which I'm sure you're well aware of, Somalia, Haiti, it's actually more than 50% of GDP.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And then when I was working in Korea, Japan, places like that, you have people there from the Philippines, all of Southeast Asia. Yeah. And without exception, they all had their own homes. They all had their own plot of land, and they were sending 1 to 2, children to either K-12 or into the university. And so it's the benefits are just incredible. Looking at leveraging those remittances, though, would you say $441 billion? That's real money.
Yep.
And so when you're looking at that, the velocity, the movement of the money. How do you leverage that so that actually you're extracting the very maximum benefit from that possible?
Well, that's a great question. You mentioned the positive side, and as an economist, we'll always look at that. But there's also a great cost. Generally speaking, people don't migrate unless it's a necessity. People don't want to leave their hometown, their friends and their families and their cultural zone behind to go somewhere else unless they really need to. So what we want to do is make sure that people who do make that sacrifice actually have a good way of maximizing the impact of their money. So that starts with financial education so that people understand what their long-term goals are and how they can realistically achieve them.
So financial and economic literacy is really key to no matter what your socioeconomic or educational background, that's key.
Yeah, because think of it this way, a mother who leaves her family behind to work as a domestic worker in another country will want to send an extra specially nice Christmas present to show that she loves her family. Buying an iPad or new shoes for your children might not be the most effective way to do that. And sometimes you have to send home a little less and spend the money on education as opposed to on a gift like that. And most people don't necessarily think about that. They want to send something beautiful back that makes their children feel good. That's not necessarily always the best approach in terms of their long-term perspectives.
I like where you're going on this. Banks and how they're involved in this, or financial institutions. We'll say banks, but financial institutions. How can they maximize the impact of this? Because in many cases, they may be the conduit of this money coming in. Whether you're going through Western Union or MoneyGram or whatever these these mechanisms are to get it out there. And of course, there's the whole informal thing in many countries as well. But how can they maximize what they're doing within the communities? And the reason I'm asking this, because you have a finance background, is so it's not just, you want them to have the, good bottom line. They're making money out of this. But how do they help the local community so that everybody is benefiting from this and not just the institutions that are controlled by the elites within these communities?
Well, one thing that we've done from the international institutions side is we're part of something called the G20 Working Group on Remittances, which has basically advocated for years to decrease the cost of sending money home, to make sure that as much money remains in the hands of people as possible, and at the same time trying to make sure that access to finance is maximized so that everybody can have access to a bank account, and as you said, a formal way of sending money, which has other benefits that, that probably go beyond the scope of the show, but that helps people start to build a credit history, helps people start to save, and helps give people access to other types of things such as loans, mortgages, and other financial services products.
Well, what they do is they become part of society, and the one word that you didn't say, taxes, which is, you know, part of this whole thing. But yet, when you start to pay tax into your own home country or community, it keeps that base. I mean, it's almost like an anchor. It's just like people paying taxes in America, and everybody saying, hey, I don't want to pay tax. Actually, you should be proud that you can actually afford to pay tax. It's very important because it roots you to wherever it is that you are with that government. It makes you a stakeholder in all of that. So looking at this notion of stakeholders, how do we, through this financial literacy, either the formal or the informal sector, but allow that to expand so it's multi-generational, so the grandma and grandpa and the mom, dad, the kids, the grandkids, all of a sudden they all become part of this unified whole based around something as simple as a remittance.
That's actually one of the areas where I think we have a lot to learn from people who are already doing this sort of thing. I've worked with many communities, a number of Filipino communities in Italy are a great example, where people who have gone through the process themselves and been in Italy for 40, 50 years, despite having the original thought of being there for only 10, have learned those tools and have passed them on to other people in the community who are effectively in the position where they were 30, 40 years ago, to pass on that knowledge and to have people pass it on to their family members so that migration becomes a choice and not a necessity.
You know, looking at this whole thing, and I like that, I don't remember the exact word that you actually used, but the sacrifice, I think that was the word you used, the sacrifice. People don't think about that. No. They're coming here, you know, they're taking from our society, they're not really paying back in, you know, the taxes and Social Security and all these other kinds of things, but it really is a sacrifice. And when you get into their homes and you start talking and get to know them, you realize how much a sacrifice that is, because they love their culture, they love their history, they love their families and people. So as one of the last questions is, how do we foster this so everybody sees this as a true win-win-win, and it's not the fact if somebody's taking something from somebody else, you know, it's a zero-sum game.
Well, honestly, I think you're answering your own question. Things like this show provide people like me an opportunity to actually talk to people and explain that effectively the process that's going on is the same one that's going on in all of our families every day. It's just a different way of looking at things. People may have a different accent. You might hear by mine that I'm not exactly homegrown, but the process is the same in every family. And as long as you concentrate on people, the family, and the sacrifices that are being made, I think there's a great deal of understanding from both sides. And as long as everybody plays by the rules, I think I think everybody understands what's
10 seconds, what do you see for the growth and expansion of your consultancy?
From the firm itself, well, as long as there's development work to be done, I think we'll have a rich future.
So maybe your third or fourth generation is still doing this. Anyway, this is Robert W. Mines, his Vice President at Mines Consulting Associates. Thank you for being with us as we talk about this notion of remittances, the importance of it, how everybody can benefit from it as we create the Emerald Planet.
Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rooftop money. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Only you can prevent wildfires. Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home? When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains.
With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water.
At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site.
That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff.
You know what the best part is? What? More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent. Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome, and thank you for being with us as we come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States, as we're looking around the globe in 144 different nations. And we're looking for what we call the best of the best technologies, the best services, the best products, and the best people that are making a difference as we go through the 21st century. And we're looking for ways that we're going to be able to accommodate 2 billion new people, yes, 2 billion new people by 2050, and hopefully, we shouldn't say hopefully, we plan to be sure that we actually enhance so that they actually have a very robust lifestyle and at the same time contributing to the economies, contributing to the environment, and also to civil society development wherever they may be on the planet. And have a gentleman who really thinks about this at great lengths and great depth. He's a financier. He's been working in the whole notion of how do you move money around the globe and how to leverage that money. This is Robert W. Mines, who's Vice President for Mines Consulting Associates. And Robert, welcome to the Emerald Planet TV.
Thank you very much, Sam. It's a pleasure.
Glad to have you here. One of the concepts that comes out of some of the work that you're doing, but really people hear it, but they don't really know what it is, the diaspora. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a very strange word. It doesn't normally flow off the tongue, but at the same time, every nation has a diaspora. In most cases, they're quite dynamic, mm-hmm. And they have very great benefits to not only their home country, but the host country where they are now.
Absolutely.
So through your experience as far as Mines Consulting Associates, what is the diaspora? And how is that something that we need to be conscious of as we look towards the future, both for the economy, but also civil society development and the environment, because all these are tied together?
Absolutely. Well, effectively, Sam, the diaspora is the part of a country that lives abroad. It's as simple as that. I think you said it yourself. And the diaspora often forms a bridge with their home country in terms of finances, in terms of cultural exchanges, political exchanges, information exchanges. So from my point of view, it's sort of the threads that hold countries together in large part. And they have a tremendous impact on development. And that is where it becomes very interesting from my point of view.
Mm-hmm. Now looking at the diaspora coming in and through Emerald Planet TV, we're working with literally well over 100 of different diaspora organizations, many from the continent of Africa, mm-hmm. Latin America, Southeast Asia. So it's a really a big mix.
Yep.
So how do you reach into these communities and do it from the standpoint of, and through your consulting work, it's a mutual benefit thing, but at the same time, in altruism and humanitarian outreach, how do we leverage it so it's not just the money, but it really is how do you shape and mold but enhance societies both in the host country and in the home country where these people may be coming from.
Right. Well, you introduced my finance background. What you may not know is that before I was in the finance background, I actually founded 2 NGOs, one of which dealt specifically with this topic, working with diaspora organizations to help them reach out to government. Because one of the things that I noticed very quickly is that these organizations, you'll have professionals working 9 to 5, 5-6 days a week, and then on the weekend they send money home in a little group and have little development projects in their home countries. And the amount of respect that I had for people who are that dedicated to improving the lives of people in their country was tremendous. And that's a field that's always interested me a great deal. You asked the question, how can we help them? And that was sort of the goal of that NGO, was to bring them in contact with, in this case, the Dutch government, to advocate more for what they do, to advocate for greater development financing, and to advocate for easing the ability to send their money home, which is not always very easy. But for me, that diaspora home country link also has tremendous opportunities. I'm sure you know from your youth 1 or 2 things that you always ate that are very much local to your own area. Like for me, being Dutch, Gouda cheese is something that I'll always pick up when I go to Holland. American friends of mine in Rome, they always had Kraft macaroni and cheese, and they bring this from the United States. Right. It's not an expensive thing, but it's a thing that reminds you of home.
Yes. And the taste and the smell.
Right, and we call them nostalgic goods for a very clear reason.
Comfort food.
Yeah. But it's a thing that you associate with your home country, and that also creates an automatic link. Organizations that are willing to produce or export that to the community can do quite well. And so fostering that type of idea, that type of entrepreneurship, is one of the things that we love to do.
Yeah, I had this very situation. We were doing a lot of training at one time in Japanese for Americans who are going over to establish a new factory in northern part of Japan. They get there, and 4th of July rolls around, and they said, "Oh my gosh, where are we going to find hot dogs and all those things?"
Absolutely.
And so we get this frantic call saying, "Hey, 4th of July is in 7 days. We have nothing here. We can't find anything." So we did a whole care package and had it airlifted into northern Japan for them, and they just loved it. And of course we sent enough so they could share with all the Japanese families that they were working with over there. And it's just amazing, those simple little things, that what you can do. But going back to the diaspora, it's not only just the money. We can talk about the remittances, and we will because of the financial part, but it's learning new skills, attitudes, language, perfecting their English, because that's very important globally. So how do we transfer these skills back into these various societies so that it's not the colonialization concept, but actually it's a mutual sharing, and of course we want to bring the richness of those culture societies into American society. So it's a two-way flow. How do we do that, and how do we foster that so that people feel very comfortable and very natural in doing that?
Well, anytime you have a group of people moving, there's a learning process from both sides. The more significant that group is, the more significant the learning process. I think, politically speaking, if we look at the current environment, that's a very clear thing. And for me, it's a question of continuing to engage. Making sure that both sides are talking to each other, making sure that education is provided, making sure that there's actual attention being paid to building that bridge.
Being the sensitivity to those.
And in most cases, the first generation, they'll be extremely dedicated towards becoming successful and having their children be educated. But they may not be as easily Americanified or brought into the society in which they've come into as the following generation. So I think we also have to be realistic there, and understand that integration is also a process that takes time. What most people here don't see is the process that's taking place on the other side. Because when somebody is here and goes back for vacation, for instance, they may take things with them from here, and they automatically carry part of our culture to their own.
Yeah,
and so it's a change process on both sides.
Yeah, and it's just amazing when you go in. And actually, I've traveled. I was in Tanzania. We were in 30 major cities, towns, very large communities. We traveled with Tanzanians, and we were with Tanzanians the whole time we were there. And it was always this good-natured, fun, but very serious give and take.
Sure.
You're in America. Yeah. Okay. And then we're saying, yeah, we are in America, and in essence, what can we share back, to the United States and all that?
Absolutely.
Going to the money and remittances and these things that you and I have talked about before, we normally think of you're just, in a sense, dumping money into places like that. People giving it, for whatever niceties they want. But yet there's probably tens of thousands, maybe millions of small businesses that are being created out of these remittances. And so you're strengthening the society in which this remittance money is going.
Right.
So how do you take that and then leverage that so that again, it's more give and take between these disparate societies and long distances so that everybody benefits. And how do you do that through your consultancy work so that it pays your bills, but at the same time it has a fundamental change on numerous societies?
Right. Well, we've talked before about the sheer volume of remittances. We're talking about $441 billion every year.
It's just an amazing amount of money. That's real money.
It's a staggering figure. Yeah. And I'd push back a little bit on the niceties because if you look at how the remittances are spent, easily 90% of it goes to food, clothing, shelter, education. So absolute bare bones essentials, because most of these people wouldn't be moving from one place to another and leaving their family and friends behind if there wasn't a real need. So the question is, what do you do with that little bit that's left over? What can you do with what's saved, and how can you invest? And I love to say that moving around in the globe requires a lot of entrepreneurship, but it doesn't make someone a successful entrepreneur per se.
Right.
And as an economist, I want to be very careful in encouraging people who've spent or who have sacrificed greatly to spend money on a risky business, because about 80% of businesses, even for people like you and I, will fail in their first couple of years. So the kind of strategies that we're looking for are more ones that have collective saving. And I'm
so really group. You're looking at group.
Right.
Group collaborative of some kind.
Yeah, and one of the best examples that I can think of is there was a group of Filipinas in northern Italy who actually have a group that saves together, sends the money to the Philippines collectively, and invests in a agricultural cooperative. And that cooperative only invests their money in projects that are already successful. So not what we would call greenfield projects, but projects that need to be scaled up. And so just by doing it that way, the cooperative has received 60% more money every single year because of the inward investment. And for the people in the Philippines who don't have a great deal of money to invest and certainly don't want to risk it, they have a relatively safe bet that also increases the value of their money.
Two quick questions because we're running out of time. Migration, the importance of that. How can that be invested in as a leveraged business? And then again, what do you see as far as your consultancy, how you can help do all these things as far as among the various diaspora organizations?
Well, the process of migration is as old as humanity itself. So I'm not worried about that going away anytime soon. It's a question of how we deal with that.
Just run out of time. What do you see for the expansion and growth of what you're doing?
Well, as I said, as long as people are migrating, we're quite happy and willing to help people maximize the benefits of it.
So the diaspora is alive and well and going to continue.
I think that's definitely the case.
Neanderthals are moving around. We're still moving around. Robert W. Mines, Vice President, Mines Consulting, and thank you for being with us as we're looking around the globe for these best practices, the ways that we can reach into communities to bring profound change at the same time to help everyone around the globe as we create the Emerald Planet.